What up, YouTube? Webhead Mike here, and I just got done seeing Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves thanks to the Amazon Prime membership. Now, actually, it wasn't mine. While I do have an Amazon Prime membership, I was not ready to pull the trigger on this because I wasn't too sure what I was getting into. And that's when someone I haven't heard from in a while decided to gift me a screening alongside him and his family who were planning on going. And I decided, why not? I hadn't seen him in a while, and the movie might actually be good. Now, I certainly had plenty to anticipate and dread going into this. Anticipate because the reviews came out a couple weeks before the release, and well before that, we had solid trailers at play showing a lot of what was going to be happening. And then, however, I had dread because I heard the director say in an interview, or something to the effect of, "We love emasculating our male characters because it's so fun and so fresh." Well, let me put it to you nicely. It is not fun, and it is certainly not fresh. It has been done to death in this industry, and if you continue to do it, it will lead to the death of your industry. Do not make a mockery of your characters. I know you might know what you think you're doing, or you think you might know what you're doing. But again, if you do not take your story and character seriously, the audience has no reason to either. Now, also speaking of things dread in the trailer, I was worried about the special effects because I saw the Paladin's dagger sword come off like it was a toy. And I gotta say, that made me very trepidatious because if you're not going to commit to making that look authentic or real or practical in combat, I can't buy it on screen. However, again, I did finally see the movie, and to my surprise, I enjoyed it. I saw good writing at play first and foremost because each of the characters had great moments to overcome their own deficiencies. They had great dialogue to talk with each other and move the story along. And then even more so, I saw game mechanics influence the story to make it real. There's actually a moment when the sorcerer says, magic just can't solve everything. There are limits to what it can do. And you see that in play on the screen because there are times when material components need to be used. There are times when somatic components need to be used, and verbal. And it especially showed up in the final fight against the evil wizard because there were people trying to interrupt concentration, people trying to gag up their mouth so they can't speak verbal components, and trying to tie up their hands so they can't make somatic components. And I was like, man, that's great. And then I see moments that take me away from that because I'll see a druid wild shape 6 times in one sequence and begin to think, wow, it's a pretty high level druid you got there. What are you doing struggling against a displacer beast or a mimic? But no, it was still really darn solid overall because, like I said, it's great to have characters that have these deficiencies or problems or insecurities they have to overcome. In the Bard's case, he needed to stop shifting blame off of himself and start using his I statements like, I was a bad dad. The barbarian has to admit that she wasn't ready for a new life and it drastically hurt someone she loved. And the sorcerer needed to find his self-confidence because his greatest enemy was himself. And it was beautifully done using a magic item that had exposition through the magic item. I'm not going to say too much more because, again, I don't want to... You can't spoil something that's good or bad, but I do want the impact to not lose its sharpness. Now, however, 2 characters that definitely didn't have too much of this to do was the druid and the Paladin, because they might have been the best characters in terms of being at home with themselves, okay with who they are, especially the Paladin. He is a paragon of virtue. He's already gone through his journey. He's made peace with his bits. So all he really does in this movie is help in a few cases, and then pass on some words of wisdom before he goes his own way, so they can go forward with theirs. And that was really well done. But then I begin to hit other moments that begin to irritate me, like the wild number of wild shapes. The Bard not really doing any Bard things. Like, I'm not even sure he gave Bardic inspiration for anything. And it just made me think, you put so much thought into making so much of the game come alive in this movie. Why did you drop the ball on this? Still, though, it was really solid. Also, speaking of solid, to see practical effects done in so much of where they could, especially with the humanoid races. Like, I saw Aarakocra, Dragonborn. It was either an orc or a half-orc, and it was done with prosthetics. Love it. There was also, I think, one bit where they saw a gnome, and they did some sort of a size change, like similar to like something you would see in The Hobbit. That was really cool. And that dagger sword I mentioned earlier, totally fixed with this movie. This thing flies off lightning fast, like it should if it's going to be practical in combat, and just came together so much better. No, yeah. So I'll probably mull this over a little bit longer, but it's definitely above a 5 out of 10. It's definitely not a 10. It's definitely not a 10 out of 10. If anyone says that, they are enthralled with the moment and very prone to hypnosis. But I think I will give it an 8 out of 10, and I'm not sure I'll vary too much from that. I remember when I saw the Batman with this same guy, he gave it a 10 out of 10, but I gave it an 8 out of 10. Lo and behold, a few years later, it doesn't crack $1 billion at the box office, and he says, oh, well, it's just, it was like 40 minutes too long. And well, that was another thing that made me trepidatious about this movie, Honor Among Thieves. It's 2 hours and 15 minutes. That is a bit long, and it made me worried. However, I know that's ironic considering my favorite movie is RRR, which is 3 hours long. That being said, in this movie, it did not really seem to drag. I can't point to any point that did that. And speaking of the box office, I do kind of hope it does well enough, because I think you could build a world out of this. And maybe that's part of the reason why we didn't see the Bard do too much magic, because if you're trying to introduce this to a bunch of normies, you can't just dive into the deep end. They'll get scared and run off. And I think that was also a bit of that work with the geography at play. They were really only in 2 locations. There was Icewind Dale and Neverwinter, and road traveling between the 2. Oh yeah, and the Underdark. Again, I guess that's not too much in terms of change of vistas for the average viewer. And speaking of the average viewer, the audience I saw it with was very receptive to it. There were even cheers and laughter at certain points, much like I would see in an old school MCU movie or a Top Gun Maverick, but not quite at the level of RR, where people are literally dancing in the aisles when the music comes on. But again, that's my thoughts. I've gone on for 9.5 minutes now. I thank you for your time, though. What about you? Have you seen it yet? Any thoughts? Have I influenced you to or not to see it? Let me know in the comments down below. Again, I thank you for your time. Please consider liking and subscribing. And until next time, Webhead Mike, out.